been shooting film for last 10 years, and because lots of people seeing me shooting films and enjoying it all the time, they often ask me why I still shoot films that has lots of limitation. I agree, slow, expensive, and lots of failures, etc. So in today's video, I want to share why I still shoot film in 2022 and maybe why you should start this year. The first is aesthetics. It's a very subjective aspect, but also this is the biggest reason to shoot film for many people. Depends on what film stock you're using. It has unique and beautiful grains, and many vintage lenses produce sharp but soft photos. So that's why I only use vintage lenses on my film camera. So if you search YouTube, there are lots of tutorials how to emulate film look in your digital photos, and most of the main aspect that they are just is about grain, softness, and colors. Not only that, film produce some unexpected imperfection such as light leak, dust and scratch, etc. If you have those on your digital photos, you won't be happy with the result, but with a film, people will say, oh, that's a part of the film photography. So anyway, to be honest, those aesthetic aspects are possibly reproduced in digital photography through editing. But why would you imitate when you're able to shoot real? Colors from film stocks are amazing. As you probably know, all the film has its unique color tone. And I saw many people want to try film photography because of its lovely color tone. Most of the people think color tone from films are pastel tone with a bit of vintage look. It is true, but also it's not true. For example, my favorite negative film is Kodak Ektar. It is known as finest grain and they produce quite neutral color with a bit of warmer tone, which is good for landscape photography. Another favorite daily film stock is Fujifilm Z200. It has a lovely green tone and it produces like pastel and vintage color, which many people loves. But on the other hand, my favorite slide film is Velvia 50. It produces vivid and less grain photos, which is not many people expecting from film. And if you look at the slide film itself, it's amazing and beautiful. Anyway, if you use Fujifilm digital camera, you have a film simulation like Velvia, Provia, Astia, Acros. If you start film photography, you can shoot those in actual film rather than imitating with a film simulation. So film photography has lots of limitations. For example, unlike digital photography, when you load the film into your film camera, you have a limited amount of frames that you can shoot. For example, like 36 frames for 35mm camera and 10 to 16 frames only for medium format film camera. So every shot are money. But for me, those limitations gives me to think carefully, shoot each shot, thinking about composition, lighting, and even the story in the frame. I'm not saying that you cannot think carefully when you're shooting digital, but I tend to spend much more time for each shot when I shoot film, as I have a limited amount of frames and I cannot preview on the screen. There's no screen on film camera. Also, when you load the film, you cannot change the film in most film cameras. That means you also need to choose your film stock carefully, whether you want to load color film or black and white, or even what ISO film you want to shoot with before you load. Sometimes you regret, actually many times you regret, but you will find the nice composition with a story with that limitation. Films are expensive. It is true that film is getting more expensive, and even Kodak increased the price quite a lot this year. If you look at the consumer level film like Fujicolor C200 or Kodak Pro Image 100, it is about $9 Australian per roll, and develop and scan in the lab will be about $13 Australian. So overall, $22 Australian for one roll of film with the develop and scan. So if you shoot every week for a year, it's gonna be 1,144. It is not cheap, but think about how much you usually spend for upgrading your digital camera, as you probably upgrade your digital camera for better resolution or better sensor every few years. You don't really need to think much about this in film photography. You buy one camera and change films, as film is like a sensor in digital camera. Film camera is getting more expensive. I think because of the trend, the film camera price increased a lot for the last few years. For example, this Leica film camera, like M3, was about 1,000 Australian dollar for about 4 years ago when I bought it for the first time. But it seems like it's sitting around 2,000 Australian dollar only for the camera itself at the moment. It's a bit crazy, but I want to say two things. First, there are lots of relatively cheaper and good film camera out there, like Minolta X300, which is my very first film camera, and Pentax K1000 and so on. So as film itself is like a sensor, film camera can be less important compared to digital photography. So you probably can start with some cheaper film camera. And second thing is that if you decide to spend a little bit more money for film camera, think as an investment. If the camera price is increasing, today is the cheapest. And usually film camera lasts for long. This is my Leica film camera. It produced around 1960s and it works quite well still. So overall, I mentioned some reasons of why I still shoot film in 2022, and there are lots more reasons. Even though I mentioned about unique aesthetic, unique colors and grains, overall I just like the process of film photography. When I shoot film, I can focus more on basic photography, composition, exposure and story, etc. Also making a pre-visualization about the final result while shooting is exciting. When I shoot digital, I don't really need to imagine what will be the final result like, as I can check the photos on the screen straight away. Anyway, photography is one of my relaxations. When I work as a wedding photographer or commercial photographer, final result is the most important thing rather than shooting experience. But now, I shoot what I like, so shooting experience is also important or more important than final result. So what's your thoughts about film photography? Is this video convince you to start film photography this year? I hope you enjoyed this video and make sure you try film photography at least once this year. It won't break your bank account at the beginning. I said at the beginning. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.